Hi there, my name is Zachary. This is my digital history research project presentation for my class, Root of World Problems. I did it on the power of the atom, nuclear power, our history, and where we're at today. Sit back and enjoy the journey. Thank you. We walk in our house after a long day at work, long day at school, flick on our lights, turn on our TV, don't think about where our energy's coming from. Maybe we do the same thing when we leave the house. We don't turn off our lights, our power, anything like that. Many others are very conscientious, and we think about where we get our energy. Some have moved off the grid and gone solar. Uh, but what about options? What about other alternatives to this dirty energy, such as coal and oil and natural gas? What about wind? We see the turbines as we're driving from Walla Walla to Lewiston or on our way to Seattle from wherever we're going. What about nuclear power? This has been a toss or keep question for a while. It's very volatile. It is yin and yang. It has its ups and downs. We can see this at Fukushima when they tried to harness the energy and they had a meltdown. And now Japan is making, I believe it was 7 new coal-fired power plants. Almost a step back in where we were trying to go. And what has happened in our past to affect the way we use nuclear energy. And to look at that, we gotta look into our history and where we came from. To understand the role of nuclear power, we gotta look at its origins or where it came from, its uses or misuses, and the laws that have been put in place now to guide us on nuclear power and what we find rational, irrational, or against the laws of civilization. Time to understand nuclear energy, we need to look back to a time before World War II when we were very dependent on non-renewable resources or renewable resources and such. From 1930 to 1950, a lot of people were discovering science. There wasn't a lot of nuclear energy or the use of the atom as bombs. And some influential people that actually helped us understand the use of the atom and the nuclear power were Otto Hahn and Enrico Fermi, that I'll talk about here in a little bit. And then a group of many at the College of France in Paris, College de France in Paris. And this is in 1939. And this isn't no poor man's thing. This is to be a scientist, you got to be rich. You got to be able to have the money to get the tools, the products used, such as uranium, radium, all those elements. And unless you have the backing of a government like the College de France or the money like Otto Hahn and Enrique Fermi did, you wouldn't be able to make much of a foothold in the world of science. Just a small packet, just a pink packet of sugar that you would find at a coffee shop or anywhere, gas station, anything like that. A packet of that, think of that's a gram. A gram of radium back in the day was $100,000. And that radium was a key element in a lot of this nuclear fission and the stepping stone for finding the use of nuclear power. But to do that, we need to look at who discovered nuclear power anyways. And these influential people that discovered, like I stated, were Enrico Fermi, Otto Hahn, and the people at College de France. We start with Fermi, who was a physicist in 1934. And he was first discovered the splitting of atoms with neutrons. So he shot neutrons at atoms and split them, and it created isotopes. And isotopes are the same element but with a different mass. So usually every time you have the element shows up anywhere, it has the same mass. It'll no matter what. But when you have different masses, it's considered an isotope. Some are stable, some are highly volatile, and they can be used for other things as finding new elements and the creation of energy. And 4 years later, Otto Hahn used that same information to create the byproduct of beryllium. And he found that he could release energy and create a new use for, instead of coal or oil, found a new use, such as atomic energy. But halfway through 1939, we have the College de France, who has a lot of money and government backing, leading the way on fission and the use of power of the atom. They actually created a patent for the uranium bomb back in 1939. They had ideas of a workable nuclear reactor and gained the backing of French government very easily. And with such advancements, they were able to lead the forefront. But with the years ahead and Germany and the World War II, they were scared that Germany would invade France. So a lot of people at College de France destroyed what they could and took what paperwork they had and fled the country, fled town, whatever they had to do to stay safe. Unfortunately, the Germans were able to discover enough work that they could reconstruct mechanisms and figure out what elements they were using at the College de France. And people became concerned that they were going to use it for bombs and all the wrong reasons. And that became a power struggle. And radium, uranium, other particles like that are the center of nuclear power. And when you take uranium and bombard them with the right elements, it can become enriched, which makes it a atomic bomb, or very volatile. And they thought that Germany was going to do this, so America started the Manhattan Project. And not even just a few years later after that, Fermi and others gathered in Chicago to develop their theories even farther on endless nuclear reaction for the good of mankind, instead of this bad, instead of weapons of mass destruction, this enriched uranium. They went in Chicago, and which is called Chicago Pilot 1. It was on I believe it was on a squash ball court in Chicago College, and these scientists came up with a way to create an endless reaction to produce energy. And the way they did it, they had coated rods of some sort, and they slowly pulled them out. And as the reaction would continue. And as they would pull them out, it would get faster, and until finally they pulled them all the way out, and the reaction was just endlessly continuing. This led to the U.S. having to set guidelines and being on the forefront of protection and setting standards. And this led the U.S. to pass the Atomic Energy Act of 46 and I believe 54. And they passed this in light of the first full commercial plant in Shippingport, Pennsylvania. They felt like they got to do something. You can't just sit here and people were building plants willy-nilly. There was fault lines people probably didn't know about. You had to take precautions. And so with this first act in 46, they set a guideline for peaceful use of atomic energy and the acknowledgement of the safety of the public and the health of the public. And then in 54, they took a step back and they stated that the U.S. could produce nuclear weapons commercially for the protection of the civilization and the safety of the civilization. I feel like that's a little backwards, but I mean, to each their own. They might have felt threatened and had, they didn't know what else to do. And this act also in 54 came with changes to some legislation regarding insurance. Also, it stated that depending on the size of the reactor, the different insurance had to be provided by the owners. And we see this at 3 Mile Isle and Browns Ferry because things weren't produced correctly. At 3 Mile Isle, the rods that were for the toxic gas coming out of the reactor were supposed to go up and over the control room and released into an open area. Instead, they were built underneath the control room, and they had to evacuate sooner than they could to help stop that. And then the same thing in Browns Ferry. They constructed the reactor wrong. The reactor sits inside a concrete cylinder, and then it has to sit on pads. And they built it, and they built pads wrong. And then they got all the way to the end of the building of the structure, and they realized, oh crap, we messed up, and they had to go back, and it cost millions of dollars. But just a few years before the incident at 3 Mile Isle, we have France and Germany doing their courts and parliament. Germany produced their atomic law in 1976. Like France, who had no sort, they just used courts and parliament to help with that. In Germany, you could be fined up to 100,000, I may pronounce this wrong, Marks, which is the currency in Germany back then, and which was about 55,000 US dollars. Compared to France, where you could be fined up to $2,000 francs, which was only $329 back then. And that's a big standard. And in Germany, it was $100,000 no matter what. In France, it could be anywhere from $400 to $2,000. So it was handled differently around the globe, but it was still a general thought that we needed to produce some kind of general consensus on where we should go and what we should do with it. Because if it's in the wrong hands and led to just go willy-nilly, we might end ourselves. But if it's used in the right form of mindset, we can relieve ourselves from this burden on coal and dirty energy and move forward with our science, and who knows what we could find. I do appreciate you joining my TED Talk. Thank you. Have a good day.